eyes of Zacharias. Estolia's future balancing. Lack of faith would try all of us. Difficult decisions approaching. The last hope for the nation. Alexandros as the last resort. Bemoaned others' lack of action. It's your choice was...
I once wondered if Mari regretted leaving the only life we knew in Kemet, where I labored as a slave, painting temple walls while her fate as a high priest's concubine loomed. We exchanged that precarious certainty for an uncertain future, journeying to a destination I would only recognize upon arrival. I could never fathom how Mari understood my thoughts so clearly, responding as if my unspoken words reached her heart. But this time was no different. We paused in a small township nestled along the northern coast, where the restless seas of Centrarth stretched endlessly before us, their vastness echoing the unknown paths ahead. She smiled, and her words almost escaped me, for the heavenly gleam of her smile clouded my senses. We were not meant to serve the priests of Kemet, she asserted with quiet strength. We are destined for far greater things. You guide us to the place we must reach. Key. Inscription on the petrified old mother tree.
Alexandros pushed his food aimlessly, his appetite lost since his brother's birthday. Tonight marked the final night of Apollyon's seclusion, and somehow Alexandros was certain it was a sham. Powerlessness gripped him as he faced his uncle's apathetic indifference. Most of his peers dismissed the promise of Zacharias as mere superstition. Few believed the old teachings held any merit, if only... His thoughts came to a shattering halt as realization struck him with crystal clarity. For the past 6 days, Alexandros had been lamenting his uncle's indifference and apathy, critical of the decline in the quality of spiritual instruction provided to his peers, scathing in his own mind at the absence of initiative in others, all the while avoiding the task deity had entrusted to him. His uncle was not the last resort, and his peers weren't in line for the throne. Their lack wasn't the issue, it was within himself. He set down his knife and fork and reached up to his sash, gripping the handle of the dagger bestowed upon him when he became the last resort. Regardless of others' actions or inactions, Alexandros was the only one who could act. Nobody else could stop Apollyon. His heretical actions created the crisis, and the last resort, Alexandros, was the only person who could ameliorate it. He must face his destiny, and Apollyon himself. He got to his feet and pushed the plate of uneaten food away. His brother was in the seclusion chamber in the temple. He would confront his brother, urging him to abdicate. If he refused, Alexandros knew what he must do.
Ulysses and Alexandros. Estolia needed them to persevere.
Alexandros, committed to action, went to the temple to the office of the keeper. He felt a wave of determination surge through him, knowing he had to approach this crucial moment with unwavering resolve. Expecting to see his uncle, Alexandros found Ulysses sitting at his father's desk. A capitulo spread out on the desk in front of him.
"Where is your father?"
he inquired, a note of urgency threading his voice.
"He is spending time at home with mother. What's the matter?"
Ulysses asked, frowning. Alexandros hesitated, apprehension heavy in his chest, and replied,
"We must request an audience with Apollyon and Patriciala. We have to discern their true intentions. As the last resort, I must exercise the authority entrusted to me."
Ulysses studied Alexandros, his gaze intense and unwavering, perhaps recognizing the weight of responsibility on his friend's shoulders. After a moment he said,
"I will arrange for them to meet us in the ceremony room."
Unspoken between them was the understanding that they could not expect Peritasis to do anything, even if he was in the temple, that they had to deal with this together. Alexandros went to the front entrance of the temple. His roving eyes went from Mount Zacharias to the long shadows of twilight dancing across the valley. Though he did not know how he would navigate the night's unfolding events, he felt an overwhelming sense of destiny urging him onward, stirring something profound within. Their peace and prosperity as a nation were threatened, and he alone stood between the forces of destruction and the prosperity promised by deity.
Seducer of innocence.
Ulysses requests your presence.
An acolyte spoke behind him. With a nod, Alexandros walked briskly towards the heavy studded doors leading to the ceremony room. He paused just outside them and took a deep breath before straightening the frayed sash of office. He squared his shoulders and nodded to the acolytes to open the doors. He strode briskly down shallow steps towards the dais in the center of the ceremony room. The doors opened on the opposite side of the circular space. Apollyon and Patriciala entered the room, approaching the dais from the far side. Alexandros felt as if deity was giving him strength and purpose, as if his spine itself was being forged anew with Anatolian steel. Regardless of the level of faith and belief exhibited by his father and by his uncle, he was not responsible for their actions or the actions of his brother. What he was responsible for were his own actions, and if his suspicions were borne out, the future of his nation was securely perched on his shoulders. Ulysses was seated on the dais, in the special chair the artisans constructed for him. Alexandros joined him, standing at his shoulder as they both watched the couple approaching. For Alexandros, the smirk on Patriciala's face felt like a bolus of lead sinking into his gut. Over the last 3 generations, the last resort did not bother to use the ceremonial words, asking whether the heir apparent had followed the dictates of deity and kept the promise of Zacharias. He, Alexandros, would not neglect his duty.
Apollyon Demetrius, heir apparent and descendant of Zacharian, as last resort, it is my duty to ask if you have placed your soul in the keeping of Patriciala, daughter of Catalan, master of purple, from the town of Promesa.
Alexandros felt as if his face was chiseled from stone. He realized now why the ensayos of former queens characterized the last resort in this moment as daunting, even frightening for the future queen. It could not be handled any other way. No matter how much warmth he might have normally felt for the woman who would be queen, he could only focus on his duty during this critical transition of power from one generation to the next. Apollyon put his arm around Patriciala's waist, and he grinned down at her.
Absolutely. I took her virginity.
The power of discernment granted each last resort for this ceremony surged through Alexandros. His brother was speaking the truth.
Did you take her virginity in the time frame dictated by the promise that Zacharias made to deity, after sundown on the eve of your 30th birthday?
Their expressions answered better than words could. They didn't wait, but they would pretend that she held his soul. Alexandros stepped forward and gripped his brother's right forearm in his hand. Leaning forward, he spoke with the greatest urgency, his voice low and intense.
Brother, you must abdicate.
For a moment, the two brothers seemed isolated from the ceremony room, the acolytes and elders witnessing the event. Even Ulysses and Patriciala all faded into the background. He faced a barrage of memories of Apollyon, taking time to teach him to ride, showing him a hatching willow egg, racing up and down the main entrance stairs to the palace. Apollyon wavered. Then, with a curl of his lip and a firming of his jaw, he moved a half-step closer to Alexandros, and the ceremonial forearm handclasp shifted to a cruel, crushing grip. Apollyon leaned towards him and said,
I am the heir apparent. I am the only one who can say whether you become keeper. Remember that.
Apollyon choices as heir, indifference to animals, evidence he did not care, seducer of innocence.